Hey guys, I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press, and today we're doing an episode of The Signal to talk about an article that was published, well, it was talked about on Twitter June 11th, so yeah, in the last week. I actually have prepped a news article to share with you guys as well, so we can get back into starting these episodes with indie news that's kind of relevant. Just real quick, I'll pull that up. And there may be other stuff as well. This is the one that I wanted to share with you guys. It's not sci-fi fantasy, but it is by a sci-fi fantasy author that I've reviewed on Periapsis Press before. She is currently crowdfunding this beautifully illustrated children's book about rescuing orphaned and or injured fawns, baby deer. And it just looks gorgeous. Paula Ritchie wrote and illustrated the second edition of the book Penance, which is a superheroes book novel. And a lot of people frequently ask about kids' books by indie authors. And I just wanted to make sure to promote this one to you guys. All right. Matt C. is in the chat. Thank you for coming. Puritan flavoritism. Let's go. So this article spawned several related discussions. And hi to Michael Caine and to William Jeffrey Rankin. Thank you guys for coming. I will show you guys part of the discussion that was spawned. Actually, I'll share Michael Caine's first since he's here. Unfortunately, the original post that both he and I are responding to has been deleted or made unavailable, which is kind of a bummer. This is not the original post that's sharing the article. This is a post that was talking in a related vein, sort of inspired by the article, basically saying that if you're looking for great art from conservative artists, that you're looking in the wrong place and you should look more specifically at Christian artists. I think Michael Caine makes a really great point here about not being so focused on the idea of highbrow art, right? Art in the highest sense, right? But that it's important to also be cultivating good entertainment art, basically. Stuff that is more along the lines of inspiring in the sort of adventure sense. Specifically mentions Tolkien, who loved stories about the Red Indians. And that inspiration in a small boy is not something to be overlooked when we talk about the great art produced by the grown man. Michael Caine says, "Oh, that's weird." Chris M, hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm glad that you could finally catch it live. I appreciate you watching them not live too. I appreciate everybody who comes along after the fact. I really do. I like having everybody in the chat and being able to talk to you guys. But it is also very nice to see the numbers keep going up, after the stream is done. The next thing I'm just going to share is my response to the same article that Michael was responding to. And I was just pointing out that Christian stories have similarly been stunted by the ideas of the things that are supposed to be included in a similar way to the sort of political, both on the right and we're seeing more now on the left, pretty overtly. The message is so important, and for Christians, we genuinely believe that the message is important beyond this life, but it can get in the way of making good entertainment and in the way of making in a like a higher sense in making good art. That in and of itself, right? The good execution of subcreation, right, would be as similarly important as and in a way more effective as communicating clearly the message, which I would argue clearly communicating salvation, the gospel, theology in general, is not really the realm of story, because if you want everything to be truth, then you're no longer telling a fiction. And both are important. If you have questions about that, I can clarify a little bit more, but I feel like I've talked about this a lot before. So I was just talking about how important the indie scene is to the freedom of Christian artists to tell the stories that they want, uninhibited by publishers saying things like, you can't swear, you can't have this or this, you can't show the characters sinning in some way. And then this is what Matt was referencing earlier. The guy, his original post used the word Puritan, and he was using it in the sense of like puritanical, pearl clutching, like overly rigid, when actually a lot of like our basic American values, right, were first established by the Puritan communities. So I just made a little jab at that. But we can't look at his original post, so I feel bad about that. But okay. Now, I feel like I've done enough build-up to actually talking about the actual article, which actually is talking about something a little bit different than sort of our usual con Inc. Entertainment bad, or all there are no conservative artists, right? Like if we want to be able to compete with the leftists, we need to have artists doing art stuff. Where are they? This article was a little more nuanced, although there was plenty of that kind of rhetoric built into it that I think that is what a lot of people responded to on social media. Michael Caine says, I wonder why Jonathan took that post down. Was there a pile-on I missed? I don't know. I didn't see anything except for Michael's post and mine. I didn't really see anything else. So I'm not sure. It seems odd to me. It didn't seem like it seemed like a post that would spur discussion, but you never know. Michael Caine says, fiction is good for baptizing the imagination in preparation of the gospel, to blatantly steal from C.S. Lewis. Very good. Fiction can instantiate the truth. I think we'd agree. Thank you. I appreciate you guys helping me to form my words. Trippy Soul, hi. Thank you for coming. It says, liberal arts is the most soulless, superficial, self-indulgent form of art I've ever seen. Art stems from God, and believers will always create it better because of it. It's like conservation of energy. Sure. So let me pull up the article, which is in The American Mind and is A Matter of Taste by Spencer Klavan, who I know nothing about. David knew more than me. But I do not follow conservative talking heads. So I have no idea who anybody is. Conservatives must snub political kitsch for aesthetic greatness. I think this tagline is probably an accurate statement. I don't think any of us would disagree with it, because most of us in the indie sphere have been avoiding sort of the political overt messaging and manipulation of the reader, because we've been experiencing it so much. We've been inundated with it in mainstream and modern media in general. So I think that the subheading is probably something everyone agrees with. I think that A Matter of Taste and the subheading are not necessarily summarizing to the best where this article is going. But you guys, if you've read it already, then you know. And if you haven't, then you'll see what I mean. For as long as I've been alive and longer, the right has had a culture problem. I can't remember a time when conservative journalists didn't occasionally publish essays urging movement stalwarts to divert just a bit of their focus away from policy activism and towards stylish artistic ventures. But it seems like it's always a losing battle. First, I want to point out that this is going to be kind of a recurring theme. He is looking for a benevolent benefactor to lift up some right-wing artist, right? Something that is worthy of being called art, right? And giving them money and time and attention, right? I've talked about this before. I don't think that's the solution. I'm a little person and I like little people. I think that one of the best aspects of indie is the independence, the unplugging, right, of the artist from some overhead, this is what you need to do. And I think it would be way better for the artist to find their readership or their audience or whatever, depending on what kind of art they're making, right? Who then support that artist. And I think Spencer is thinking of this in a very traditional way. he's wanting to see, big screen movies changed. So somebody who has a lot of money has to fund that. It has to be a very, very big production in order for it to be a real tide turning. Just gonna double check. Patrick, hi. Do conservatives have bad art taste? I like The Acolyte. Kidding. Also, hi. Thank you. We got worried there for a minute. The gentle haze of default social progressivism continues wafting unbroken in the background of most big-ticket pop art, and some not very much in the background at all. For every Chris Pratt sermon at the MTV Awards, 10 more nature documentaries about gay flamingos are greenlit. I didn't know there was such a thing, but I don't really watch nature documentaries. How long ago was that MTV Awards speech? I really don't know if you can call it a sermon, just because he mentioned Jesus. There are various reasons why the silent majority continues to sit and take this in its charmingly but unproductively silent way. General skittishness among donors about funding inherently unruly ventures like art. And there's an entire network of industrial strength machinery grinding in exactly the opposite direction. Well-established backers and iconic studio brands pumping out one of Star Wars girl boss after another cartoon about climate change. Derivative though these products may be, you're not going to compete with them. Why not? Why do skilled artists keep making and the general public keep consuming works of culture, both high and low, that communicate a bottomless contempt for the religious practices, national ideals, and sexual mores of that built the country? This is a leap. Skilled artists. The highest grossing movie, and he talks about, I think he's talking about Barbie. This is a very uncharitable interpretation of what Barbie was about. I really think it was a little bit more nuanced than that. We scoff at this stuff, but someone's buying tickets. And though politically motivated financial interests are certainly tipping the scales, it would be pure cope to imagine that even George Soros himself could funnel 24/7 agitprop into the eyes and ears of completely unwilling audiences if it genuinely had no artistic appeal of any kind. There must be reasons, besides counter-maneuvering, why efforts to launch a conservative artistic movement so often droop their way unto death. There must be reasons why right-wing alternatives to mainstream culture still often feel like consolation prizes. I can't help but suspect that what we have here is a problem of taste. I think he's completely ignoring cancel culture in this particular sense situation. I mean, things being run through a more corporate model. There aren't individual creatives writing up a script, taking them to a producer, and the producer saying, yes, let's do it. You get to be director or whatever, right? Or here's a director, we'll find your director, we'll work with you, we'll find your actors and everybody you need to do this, right? Instead, they have a team of writers and a corporate that is saying, here are the things we want to see. And it's really they're far, far more difficult for something that isn't in the in-group, in their ideals and in their political opinions, right? For something like that to get through. There's also a sense of the like this this idea of the audience. There's someone's buying tickets, he says, right? So there must be a willing audience. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. And I think it's becoming less and less true as time goes on, because people are becoming unplugged from their normal entertainment consumption habits. TV, like episode shows and movies, partly due to everything moving to streaming services, and partly due to the types of things that are being put out right now being less fun, less, even artistic, right? And more about like a political message, or trying to serve the lowest common denominator. As that has continued, we're seeing people who aren't looking for that leave. So I think there's a number of problems here with his setup to his idea of what the problem is. But we can set all those aside and talk about the problem of taste. Sorry, I've got to catch back up, you guys. William Jeffrey Rankin says that model is dying. Yep. Michael Kane says, for myself, I would prefer healthy indie scene and healthy institutions, because you will have institutions and donors. That's going to happen. I prefer that money go to better stuff. Yes. David and I have talked before how our ideal is not to have like this sort of alternative economy or whatever they call it, so much as it is to have we don't want everybody to be small. We'd like everybody to be a little bit bigger, right? All of our indie artists that we know and love, we want everyone to be bigger, but we don't necessarily want that accomplished by some institution. And we don't feel that Disney has to topple for that to happen, right? If Disney course corrects, right, they see everybody getting bigger who are doing very different things from them, and they start putting out good stuff too. Wonderful, right? Like, absolutely great. Yeah, we would prefer things to be better, right? Exactly. Patrick knows more about Spencer than I do. Spencer's dad being part of Daily Wire, the idea of only big studios being the gatekeepers is essentially what they've been trying to do. Sure. Resident One, hi. Individuals can have bad taste. In fact, most people can't recognize quality in about any art form, the same way most can't tell the difference between soda and beer in taste tests. Is that a real thing? Ugh. You could never push beer past me, unless it was like one of those like candy beers. It just like yuck. Resident One says conservatives value different things in art. Yep. Bambo discussed with him that conservatives don't often have a sense of whimsy or the fantastical. I think this, if we were going to talk about problems of taste, I think this would be the problem, right? I think that there is a prejudice against the whimsical and fantastical in the sort of same sense that there is a prejudice against artists, right? If you talk about and he's actually going to kind of make this assumption later in the article that if someone is an artist, then they are just automatically more politically left-leaning as a matter of course, right? And I think that there's like this prejudice, this idea that if you indulge in fiction specifically, especially genre fiction, that there is something that is not ideal about that. And I don't know if that is necessarily like a political thing in the way that the artist comparison is, but it's a definite thing that should be addressed. He doesn't, of course. William Jeffrey Rankin says, are people consuming them? That's an excellent question. Numbers can be fudged, especially money numbers. I think probably I think as we go, things that are less tasteful. Tried to find a different word because of the discussion, but like about their political messaging are more and more often not indulged by audiences. I think we saw that with The Acolyte. But then there are tons of people online who will go to bat for The Acolyte, right? So, or like The Boys, right? The latest season of The Boys. So like there can be this idea that there are people enjoying that content, but how many of them are actually consuming it? It's a good question. Patrick says, Hollywood is controlled by leftists. Leftists get all the movies produced. Why do leftists keep getting away with it? Surprise Pikachu face. Resonant One says, the same things that make Christian fiction bad are the same things that make woke fiction bad. Yep. And the sort of kitsch conservative media that he's talking about. Yep. To extend the taste metaphor, politics make art taste bad. So if your fiction or your story or your show has too much politics in any direction, Trippy Soul says, problem of taste. Yes, some of us have a more advanced palate. It's usually when we're not paid to like something. William Jeffrey Rankin says, very producer-driven now. His point that lots of people still go is 100% valid. Some productions are starting to take hits, but until very recently, the normies were going. Yes. Yeah. Resonant One counters William Jeffrey Rankin by saying it's investor-driven. Yep. Do nuts. Patrick says, look what happens when conservatism when it takes over. The Hays Code with movies, the comic book code, comics, children TV code, kids TV. It's just a list of do nots. Mm-hmm. William Jeffrey Rankin says they're just starting to catch on. I think he's talking about normies there. I'm almost caught up, guys. Yeah, Patrick talks about seeking freedom away from the like conservative list of do nots. In the Victorian era, artists and actors were considered part of the criminal class for the most part. I think that's probably appropriate. Doug Wise, hi. Have you? Did you just show up? I feel like I haven't said hi to you. Thank you for coming. Personally, as a consumer, any explicitly political creative is cringe at one level or another. The fact that our side is funding highlighting political creators first will make this quite a slog. Michael Caine is leaving us. He's got a book to write. One final parting shot about this article. I don't think Spencer is right on everything, but I also don't think that anyone here is his target audience. His target audience is the talking head political class / stoner class. Sure. That makes sense. But do they need to be talked to / want to be talked to / will they read this? Will they care? I don't know. Hi, Anne. Hi. She's coming in. Michael's going out. Okay. Hashtag be better. So he talks about taste, sort of being defensive about your taste. Conservatives of every persuasion have suffered more than enough abusive caricature for their supposedly boorish, unrefined sensibilities. He takes a jab at the gay flag as being a crime against fashion. Still, the fact remains that when they need to, our progressive taste makers know how to turn a phrase. They're professionals, and you have to hand it to them. They know what they're doing. He's talking here not about the left can't meme, although he mentions that later, but about like the way that they craft their narrative. And he uses Barbie as an example somewhere. Yeah, right there, near the top. So the political messaging was bad, but the marketing and optics were good. So that's the kind of way that he's talking about this. And then he talks about an entire infrastructure supports people who aren't like, these are not the leftists who meme, right? They have a large support structure to get their message across. I think they've been shooting themselves in the foot with that lately. Not necessarily with Barbie, but with some of the other stuff. Acolyte. But Doctor Who, The Boys, on some level, somebody said, don't just go watch something else if you don't like it. It's like the same, that kind of thing. But I get what he's saying here. Oh, and he talks about Slate. And I can't even. He says, there is almost nothing like this on the right. That's because everybody's doing it on YouTube. Tons of people are talking about stuff. Weekly commentary. You can get it daily if you want, right? Oh, well. Did you guys see what I'm talking about, right? It's driving me up the wall. So a line will have to be walked between Christian rock-like cringe and all-out genuflection before current year pieties. Quite, but getting there will involve facing up to the fact that many donors and, more troublesomely, a sizable number of viewers absolutely love Christian rock-like cringe. So make some of that too. I don't see the problem. So, and he's frustrated with that. The fact that people like that stuff. Just because leftoids make tripe from their position of strength, there's no reason for trads to make schlock from their position of weakness. But, right, like, when the leftoids make tripe, they're making it for leftists. And when the trads make schlock, they're making it for other trads, right? Like, so if you're trying to do bigger than that, obviously, you need to do something that's not just that. But there's an audience for that, right? So, yeah. It would be needlessly cruel to multiply examples. But all conservatives in the arts know that a major sector of the audience they're trying to reach will go in for the most appalling kitsch if it's slathered in red, white, and blue. Without disdaining them for this, it's important we be honest that they are wrong about the quality of such products as. Wrong not in a moral or spiritual sense, perhaps, but in the sense that aesthetic quality is not arbitrary, and not everyone's judgment is as good as everyone else's. Sure. Their dollars is good, though. We have to be able to admit this and talk about it because it's true, because denying it creates perverse incentives, and because no really healthy artistic culture can flourish without a discerning public or a patronage class with taste. If you want donors to fund enterprises that will create, publicize, and reward achievements in the art, you need people who know what that is. You also need to stop pretending you don't recognize the talents of your adversaries. Many earnest consumers on the right feel so legitimately embattled by the nonstop streaming feed of hate speech and psyoptry directed at them that they think they have no choice but to reconfigure their artistic sensibilities accordingly. Lashing out at Taylor Swift by pretending her popularity is unmerited. Some songs are catchy, whether you agree with their creators or not. And then he goes on to talk about substituting political allegiance for taste. I suspect we don't really know how to invoke the latter, and we're afraid of looking foolish if we try. I honestly don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's just reading The Blaze, which, okay. Yeah, I think they probably would look foolish. But a lot of artists, people who are conservatives and not artists, political commentators, people who are commenting on entertainment, are not merely attacking their political position, right? There is a lot of stuff that talks about why this is not just like, it's just not a good show, or it's not a good book, or it's not a good movie, right? They're not just saying things like, well, they substituted a African-American actor in for this redhead role, right? So because of our political alignments, this whole thing is bad. No, that's the tip of the iceberg, the most recognizable thing, and the one that the leftists, right, will bring up all the time as evidence that you have nothing, right? So the other side of the political spectrum pushes back on the stuff we disagree with about politically because it's a lot easier than talking about the actual points about what make the art bad, right? So I sort of disagree with him on this. Trying to pick back up my train of thought. I should check in with you guys. Trippy says, this is a great subject that needs to be addressed. I've seen a few memes and social media posts claiming the right can't make art, but from what I've seen, that's objectively false. I agree. In Lefty World, you get rank for being an artist. Yeah, true. Patrick points out, see, he doesn't mean from the masses. He means from the approved talking heads. Yeah. Anne says, there is a problem of if I don't know about it, it doesn't exist, which I mean, I understand. But in conservative world, I remember what Rush said, that he never felt alone because he knew there were other people like him, ones who were listening. Resonant One says, tripe or schlock should always be criticized. Bad art should not get excused because you agree with it politically or socially. And continues her idea. I think many conservatives are foolish enough to think that they alone stand. Yep. Resonant One says, never give in to team psychology. If your side does bad, call it out. Trippy Soul points out the Iron Age has produced very little red, white, and blue stories, just random, fantasy, sci-fi stories. Yep. Yes, I would say that in general, the stuff that I have read and reviewed on my website has been extremely hands-off politically. Mostly hands-off modern era. I would say there's a couple of exceptions to that. But there's nothing rah, USA, football, Thanksgiving, that kind of stuff. Way more foundational values type stuff. Chris M., when it comes to Christian conservative, if you want to use terms interchangeably, I find an attitude of I support it because it's from our side and an unwillingness to call bad art bad. Right. Patrick says he doesn't mean from the masses. He means from the approved talking heads. He wants a leader like Bill Buckley or Johnny Carson to give the head nod of approval. Yep. And that's part of my problem with him, right? That is the exact opposite of what I want. Resonant One says, and a lot of Iron Agers will not call out bad quality art. It hurts me that I can't support or recommend a majority of those who are slapping the Iron Age label on their work for obvious leniency. I think that I tend to believe people when they say, I liked this book. And then if I didn't like it, or if I think that they are overlooking obvious flaws that are too much for me, I tend to chalk it up to difference in taste. And kind of like with the rah Murica type of shows or movies or conservative art or whatever, painted red, white, and blue, right? Like he said, I tend to shrug my shoulders and say, well, somebody that product found its target audience. It's not me. So I don't feel so bad about that. I don't feel it's not something I do. Say that something is good just because they're part of my group, whether that is politically, religiously, the group of indies that I like to rub elbows, shoulders with, that kind of thing. William Jeffrey Rankin says, America. Resonant One asserts that you can parse craft and you can objectively quantify why something's good or bad. And I agree. I think the problem is that it's not like a one-to-one, right? Something that I think is like a dramatic negative in craft is for another reader something that is like a small negative. And so it's weighted differently, right? Vice versa too, right? Like I thinking in particular of some tweets that the Pulp Rev group, where they took a snippet of some story, and I think it was Trad Pub. I don't think it was any indie thing. When they were parsing out like the craft of the sentences, and for them those were a big deal, but for me I didn't think that was very important. So it's a little bit harder when you start talking about that kind of stuff. I think, yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation to have, though. Anne says tastemakers are important. They can criticize and bring forward by turns. You don't have to agree, and they create discussion. Resident One says we all have crap we love, but we should accept that it's bad, but we can love it. Anne points out that our real tastemakers are on YouTube, and a lot of the Blaze tastemakers are conservative meme bimbos. No book learning at all. Okay. Let me see if I can pick up my train of thought again here. Edmund Burke, who makes a useful distinction between learning to see distinctly what something is and evaluating whether it's any good at being that thing. It's important that they go in that order. On a side note, this is why I don't review comics, because I can say that, oh, this is a comic about superheroes, but I cannot say whether or not it's any good. Whereas with novels, specifically sci-fi and fantasy, I have a little bit more of an understanding of both of those aspects. Before you even think about judgment, you have to perceive what an artist is doing or trying to do. Then you can decide whether he succeeds at doing it, and for that matter, whether it's a good thing to do in the first place. I think this is an interesting concept, because all of a sudden he's no longer talking about whether something is good or bad. But he's no longer talking about the quality of the art. He's talking about purpose, which is significantly different and easier. And he's suggesting that conservatives don't. You can say of a corkscrew that it doesn't open wine bottles very well, or that nobody ought to drink wine, but if you say it fails to open soda cans, people think you've misunderstood the assignment. Sure, but if it's sold as something that opens soda cans, then there's a problem, right? Which I think is what a lot of modern media has been doing. Saying, I'm selling you entertainment, but it's not entertainment, right? Before you can effectively attack Poor Things or Game of Thrones or Ripley, from a political standpoint, you have to understand what they're trying to do from an artistic standpoint. Conservatives like to skip the perception part and go straight to the political judgment part, which tends to make both our culture and our criticism dull. Again, I don't know who he's talking about, because there are plenty of people who are very interesting and very entertaining, have sizable followings on YouTube, who do this, right? They talk about both. This struck my funny bone. There's one area, though, where the right exhibits pretty good taste, and that's online. What? It's well known at this point that the world of young dissidents is a carnival of memery, renegade publishing. This is hilarious to me. And tech-enabled artistic experimentation. Not indie publishing, not self-publishing, but renegade publishing. I think this should be adopted. Like most artists, the impish bohemians of what was once called the New Right are more instinctively creative than they are philosophically rigorous. Really? I have not experienced that. Maybe I'm just running in the right circles. But most, well, I would say all of the stuff that I've read and reviewed from an indie standpoint has been way more philosophically consistent. And from people who feel strongly about things than sort of just like vaguely artistic and nice, right? Here he's talking about like legit bigotry and racism and prejudice. I'm pretty sure that's what he's trying to imply here. Justified concern among elder statesmen. So I think probably that's what he is talking about when he's criticizing people for being philosophically I think he's pointing to two different groups here. I'm not certain because he's being vague. But that's where my mind went. Anne says, another point of good art is if it will let a question hang in the air or if it has to jump down your throat immediately to answer it. That's very true. Patrick says, 4chan will save us from World War III. Fed made terrorism and bad media. Yep. Tribby Souls, I literally said again at the same time as you. The hypocrisy from the left is mind-boggling. There's no way they're that disconnected, right? Am I insane? Is it me? But the meeting between established conservative worthies and chic young guns has also been hampered by an unwillingness on the worthies' part to let artists be artists. Why there is not already a Peachy Keen sitcom in production, for instance, is beyond me, but I suspect it's once again a matter of taste. We want conservative art TM, not art by conservatives. We want morality tales in recognizable and safe formats that lead us to exactly the conclusions we already held, and no swearing, please. This is basically the sense that I get from this is this is a legitimate thing that he wants, right? He wants it to be approved. And then this one feels more like he's being sarcastic or like poking. I think that he makes an interesting point here. If we're serious about revival, we're going to have to accept the inherent risk and unpredictability that comes from letting artists see the world before they judge it. In turn, we are going to have to learn to suspend our own judgment long enough to see what the artists bring us for what it is. In other words, we have to cultivate a little taste. I think he's making an interesting point, and I think that going into something, knowing that the artist doesn't hate you helps with this a lot. For example, I review books, sci-fi, fantasy, and I break down as in a fairly detailed way what I think makes a book good. And I try to include at the end something about what the story is doing thematically, or if it's more overtly messaging something. I think that for certain readers, that is something that is helpful because they can go into a story and they can see things that normally they would say, ooh, that might be a red flag. That might be turning into something that I do not agree with. And they can just They can set that aside in the confidence that the person who is taking them on the journey through this story is not looking to hurt them, right? It's not looking to put them in the position of the bad guy or force them to swallow a viewpoint that they don't agree with. I think that people don't necessarily need to just be like, okay, artist, just go, right? Like if you have a little bit of trust in the artist, it makes it a lot easier to suspend that judgment, to sort of stop like trying to figure it out, right? Was that supposed to be a lesbian tit for tat commentary? Are they in a relationship? Like, you don't have to worry about that through chapters 1 and 2, right? Like, because you know that that's not where it's going. So I would say a good review, a good detailed review, or a good recommendation from somebody you trust, or some sense of who the author is can help with that, before we stumble into any arguments about taste. Anne brings up again that Spencer's the son of the old and respected, trying to bring the two halves together in a productive way. He doesn't see things quite from the other side. Yeah, Patrick made that point. No, see, you also say that I'm just doubly right, which is all the better. Okay, so here is the conclusion of his article, and I think you'll see. Well, we'll go through it. It has felt for a while as if everyone I met has a screenplay or an idea for a new media organization or a novel they want to get published. Many of these ventures are perfectly worth pursuing. Many of them are run by friends of mine and have achieved considerable success. But I'm not sure that more of them is what's desperately needed on the right. I feel like this is the paragraph that nobody read because everybody on his tweet was commenting with their stuff, right? Self-promotion stuff. His thing is not necessarily that we need more conservative artists. Instead, the right awaits. It's Cardinal Borges. Someone who not only wants to fill his villa with sculptures, but knows how to pick a real corker. Our universities. So you need a society that trains its best and brightest to tell good art from bad. Our universities won't. We have to do it ourselves in families, in local associations, and in those schools we staff with our best scholars. Some of us need to be making art, that's true. But far more of us need to be learning how to appreciate art, both for its own sake and because it will make us more effective operators in the media world. You can't spell counterculture without culture. That is his main point. It is the point that he references in the title, A Matter of Taste. His point is we need to be cultivating taste. We need to make sure that people in general appreciate art. I think that my main issue, once again, with this article is that like similar articles I've talked about in the past, it always stops short of saying, like, okay, what does that look like, right? So he talks about doing it in families, local associations, and schools, doing that, cultivating taste. But there's not really a sense that he has any idea of what that would take. I think this is something that when conservatives in these kind of articles talk about art, they tend to stop before that point. Let me see. Trippy Soul says, can't spell culture without cult. Patrick says, since the left has captured the institutions the right abandoned, anything created now are going to brand themselves and conservative TM, or at least counter the big guys, and that's where it's lost. Sure. I think I get what you're meaning. Yep. A lot of, you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But a lot of the criticism that the Iron Age faced kind of early on was that we didn't have a thing, right? We were sort of anti the other stuff, right? Like we didn't want politics. We wanted entertainment to be the focus. So in a sense, that idea is us branding ourselves as counter the big guys, right? Purposefully indie versus trad pub. Anne says, I mean, my suggestion would not be that you shouldn't make art, but you all need to network and know what else is going on. Multiple movie production companies are good, but if you know of 4 other guys who made one, there you are. You could focus more on being a producer or whatever. If you have friends, you don't all need to be chiefs. You can be free to be Indians. Trippy Soul, the power of 1, the power of 2, the power of money. Patrick says, the left calls for inclusion, then equality. Then once captured, the institution tells you to create your own, rinse and repeat. Yep. Con TV Pub would be pigeonholed into only conservative things instead of just media that, oops, I dropped my good guys politics into your sci-fi. The left has that now. Yeah. William Jeffrey Rankin says, the fact that conservatives aren't consuming art as it currently is indicative of better taste. No? Sure. And wraps up her point by saying networking and having different people who can do different tasks would give you a better chance of success, and it doesn't have to be about you. So I think going sort of back to the conclusion of the article, I think that from my point of view, I think the best way, right, to sort of cultivate taste. He talked specifically about in families, in schools. What did he say? Families, local associations, and schools. I get the idea that he's thinking raising the next generation in a way. Just the way that he's talking. Obviously, that's going to, that process, right? We start at home, reading to your kids, that kind of stuff. And when you talk about schools and institutions, there is an ideal, like a well-established ideal of what is art. And I have thoughts, like even about like classical education, particularly as it relates to literature and writing. But I think that's all kind of like formalized stuff in a captured audience setting, right? Your kids have to listen to you in like your local what is he called? Co-ops, basically. What do you say? Local associations, and then schools, right? You listen to the authority figure. They tell you stuff. This is the good stuff. And you have to be paying attention, and they have to be a good teacher. And all of that is very, there's a lot of factors at play, right? Oh, the dehumidifier just turned on. Let me know if that is too much background noise, and I'll run over there and turn it off. I'm in the basement, guys, in a Wisconsin summer that has been very, very wet so far. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. And that's all very focused on raising the next generation and not really addressing the now problem, even though he ostensibly is talking to the conservative talking heads, you know, the gray hairs and the worthies, the what did he call them? The elder statesman, that's the one. He doesn't really talk about things that would address how they can improve their taste, right? And he doesn't talk at all about who should be the arbiter of taste, but I get the sense from his article that he thinks that there should be someone who should be delivering this good taste to the viewers or the readers or the audience, right? I think from my point of view, I see a lot of normies jumping ship from mainstream media, traditional entertainment. And they're not necessarily going anywhere. They're just not doing that stuff anymore. Right now, there's a lot of people who are in the rhythm of come home and watch TV. Or in a cycle of, okay, the new batch of movies has come out. Which one do we go see in theaters or whatever? There's a sizable portion of them who are leaving, and they're not all leaving at once, right? I think that's why we see House of the Dragon is doing well, and Acolyte didn't do well, and Doctor Who's not doing well, but you get these sort of spikes in like, well, this entertainment is woke too, but it's doing fine, right? And as they leave, I think that indies in particular should be doing as much as possible to try and catch them, especially if they're already established readers. But if they aren't, if they're people whose primary entertainment media has been TV, I think somehow encouraging people to get back into reading, I think that is the best way to start building up the, not support, but like the readership of not crazy leftist stuff, right? Like, because I don't necessarily want conservative media. I don't necessarily want right-wing stories, right? Like, I think that it is great that there are good stories by conservatives. I think it would be awesome if there were great stories by people who are not necessarily conservative as well, right? Right now, the indie scene is serving people who are leaving the overtly leftist institution. So that's why I am specifically mentioning conservative. I think as far as cultivating taste, it's not one of my priorities, right? I do not feel the need to tell people that they're wrong for liking kitsch, right? Like political stuff. If that's what you like, it's not what I like, right? And I don't need to lecture you about that. I think that it's not my job to communicate taste to adults. I think that there are people who are not being served the entertainment that they want. And so they are leaving where they used to get their entertainment. And there is an opportunity for them to discover a new and better place for entertainment. I specifically think indie books, indie comics too, to some extent, although comics just in general do better because of the visual aspect. But I specifically think books because the bar for good entertainment, good art, is so low there. There's not really a monetary overhead. You don't need a benefactor, right, or donor, or a ruling class to give the nod of approval. The artist can make a good piece of art, and Amazon makes it super easy, right? They just delivers it. So if you're looking for grand production on the big screen, we're not there, right? I think the marketing is not the ideal outreach for this either. So when I'm talking about indies sort of capturing this audience that's migrating, I'm not talking about like getting your stuff in front of their face, right? I'm talking more about reviews, seeing other people who enjoyed this, seeing other people liked this part of this. I think that is the solution. Other people thought that this was a good product, and then they read that, right? And maybe their taste is improved, maybe it's not, but they find that there's alternatives and that they are supporting smaller creatives and specifically somebody who has values that do not place them in an antagonistic position against the reader. They don't hate you, like we say all the time. Okay, I think I made the roundabout point that I was trying to make. Going back to William Jeffrey Rankin's comment about conservatives not consuming like current bad art, right? And that being indicative of better taste. Anne agreed, and then Patrick agreed as well. Good point. People now go to YouTube rather than traditional TV. So you have consumption of media that is self-geared rather than fed while holding one's nose. Well, Jeffrey Rankin started typing and then realized he was doing the wrong window. I wonder what else he's doing. Patrick specifically mentions Brandon Sanderson crowdfunding his own series and says establishment media, both sides, have a dearth of real new talent. The thing is that people seek out new talent if you want them or not, and the boat will sail on without being approved or not. Patrick says, and the need for young adults / kids media directed to parents / homeschool is something all your Facebook parents adults are looking for. True. It's okay have middle of the road fans and not just your niche in group. And they don't have to be politically good. They just have to be good or able to be shared with their kids' friends or safe to give to their kids without needing to read it first. Yeah, there's certainly a large separation between kids' entertainment, like picture books, and then adult entertainment in the indie sphere right now. I generally do not run into people who are writing middle grade stuff, for example. And I think part of that is when kids are in school, there's a real belief on the more conservative side of things that there is a lot of quality old stuff, right? The classics, and the things that you buy for your library so that your kids can see them on the shelves and when they want to read, grab it, right? I think that it's tough for a writer to think that they can pull that attention. I think it's important to that like parents have a sort of expectation too when it comes to like Christian fiction for kids as being more overt and in the vein of C.S. Lewis, right? Like where things mean things a little bit more clumsily, I guess. I don't know. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people aren't necessarily writing that stuff. I think a lot of indies right now are also writing the stories that they wish they could read. A lot of people have been reading or watching TV or movies or whatever, and then they go, well, I could do better than that, and then they try, right? And then they've written a book, right? So it takes a bit different of a motivation. Somebody saying, I want something that I can give to my kids. But then again, like I'm not looking for that right now myself, right? Like my website's geared towards adults like me. So Trippy Soul says art isn't coded into our DNA, but we live in a time of commercial consumerism and have been for decades, like generational trauma handed down. The solution is creativity. Make art, write poetry. That's a good point. If one of your goals is to teach taste, then encouraging people to try it can help deliver some of that sense. Like I've always had a disdain for free verse. It's like because in high school, like we did free verse, right? And like I decided well, even I can do that. And I decided that it wasn't worth anything. I think I did a free verse poem for an assignment in college too. I got an A+ on that assignment for absolutely no reason. Just, yep. I think encouraging people to do creative things can really open that up. Oh boy, you do not need to hear anything remotely resembling poetry from me. I like the idea of it, but everything that I've ever tried, I have disliked. So I think poetry is one of those things where if you don't think about it, or if you think about it way too much, then it's good, right? Like if you don't really think about it and you just read it real fast and you sort of get like this vibe from it, then it's like it's fun and interesting. Or if you like sit and you parse it out, like, and you think about the way that things reflect and change and like all of these intricacies, like, then that's really fun and cool. But like, I tend to know like too much, like enough to be dangerous, like they say. Like it's just enough where I feel like it's pretentious all the time. Oh, Anne's internet crashed. You missed the most important part of the conversation, where I talked about how reviews are the solution to everything. The USSR showed their people grapes of wrath to show how America treats its poor. What did the people pick up on? Why does that poor person own a car? And North Korea is getting that with soap operas from the South. Wow. The North hates soap operas. And then they're not even like, the funny thing about Korean drama is it's not even like soap opera in the American sense of soap opera. Like it has all of this sort of twists, amnesia, relationships, backstabbing, he said, she said type stuff. But then like it progresses and it resolves and it's done. It's like, Anne said, I came back in time for poetry opinions. I have those. It's important to have words to quantify things and have rhythm of words when words themselves aren't sufficient. Patrick says, bad media over Shakespeare moving culture. There's probably a point there. Anne says, I agree, Katie. Share the stuff you like, talk about it, and reference it so people want to be in on the joke. Okay, guys, I think that I talked about everything I wanted to in this particular article. Like, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. But I think that my main thoughts were that Spencer had a very, very different idea of the solution than I do. And like, I tend to think that like repeated reading is good and healthy and will ultimately improve your taste. Like if you think back to the books you read in high school, and then like if you reread them and you just shake your head at yourself, you're like, I thought this was good, right? that's not just age. That's not just maturity, although there's always an aspect of that. There's also the sense of your own growth as a reader, your own experiences as a reader. I tend to think more in terms of readers doing stuff to then support like the creative work of artists. And if we're going to talk about this in a purely political framework, art that promotes and reinforces truth and our other values, then obviously that would be ideal. Whereas I think Spencer tends to be more on the there needs to be, like we've talked about, right? Like he's coming from a place of the institution is important and looking for the institution to do something. What the institution can do to improve people's taste, he does not necessarily say, but he's looking at it from like the top down towards the viewers. Whereas I think that the audience should be the main force that is elevating the good art, if that makes sense. And I think that it should be done by reviews and promoting what you like. Tribby Soul says, poems are the root of language, the roots of culture, binds humanity and shows our subjective experiences. Only takes a few miles to see a difference in language. And food, that's culture. Patrick, share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell and check out Parapsis Press for good reviews of good books. Air horns. Internet culture at its peak. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you. I still feel silly saying like and subscribe because I feel like you guys show up and you chat with me and you're already supporting me just by watching, and so I always forget to say stuff like, but plus I would like people to be promoting books and creatives and things that are way bigger and more important than me. But I appreciate you guys coming, and I appreciate your comments and you engaging in this conversation with me. So like and subscribe. Later this week, actually, I will be interviewing Jonathan. This is me forgetting people's names. I could tell you what book he's written. In Darkness Cast. Oh goodness, Jonathan. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm complete. It's time for bed. That's what it is. I will find it. Sugar. That's what it is. I will be interviewing him on Thursday. So David and I are trying to do more with our YouTube accounts, and we're sort of worked out a little bit of a very, very loose schedule between the two of us about who's going to stream when. So I will be trying to do 2 days a week now instead of just on Mondays. And I'll try to do more of this kind of discussion content, the Signal episodes on Mondays, and interviews and possibly also book club type stuff on Thursdays. We'll see. I recently moved my Gilded over to Discord. So if you were not ever a part of my Gilded and want to be part of our community, just reach out to me and I'll shoot you a link, invite link. And planning on doing some sort of community book club type thing around like an indie anthology of short stories. Right now, I'm trying to get people to tell me what they want. So if that is something that interests you and you would like to be part of, be sure to reach out to me. And if you were part of my Gilded before and haven't moved over to Discord, now's a good time. Okay. I think that's all that I needed to talk about. All right. What time is it? 11. Pretty good. All right. Everybody have a good night. I appreciate you. And I will see you on Thursday.